All right, we are live and we are live on Facebook. So before we get started and sort of roll through the agenda and go through our business, I just want to let folks know that this meeting is being recorded for purposes of the public and to comply with our Open Meetings Act law. We are also live streaming this on Facebook. So for folks who may not have the ability to see this via Zoom, you can go to the Facebook page for the DC Police Reform Commission at www.facebook.com/Police Reform Commission. With that said, I am going to hand it over to Chairman Mendelson, who is with us right now to kick off our meeting and present some opening remarks.
Thank you, Blaine. I just got let in, so I don't know if I missed anything.
You did not.
Excellent. So I want to thank each of you for your willingness to serve. Some of you reached out to volunteer. Others of you said yes when either Blaine or I called. Thank you. I want you to view your mandate broadly. The bill by which you are established, which is DC Act 23-336, and entitled the Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Second Emergency Amendment Act of 2020, states that you are to, quote, examine policing practices in the district and provide evidence-based recommendations for reforming and revisioning policing in the district, unquote. I'm excited about the possibilities. The law sets forth categories of service or experience from which I was to pick the members, but my approach was to look for individuals who want improvements to policing, who have knowledge or experience with bias policing, and who collectively reflect a diversity of perspectives. Public safety is a core function of government. Few, if any, other services are as important. The civil unrest of the past 3 months has forced us to question whether we've got it right. To what extent is Washington, D.C. policing guilty of the same racism as we are seeing in other cities? And more importantly, how do we get rid of it? What is the best, most effective training to ensure always acceptable police conduct? Are we over-policing? Are there alternatives to the traditional cop that better achieve public safety? I think it is fair to say that the council was not suggesting in its legislation that our Metropolitan Police Department is as problematic as the police departments we see in other cities. But it is also fair, even critical, that we look for best practices in policing. What can we be doing better here, especially now when racial bias is top of mind across the country? While I've said that I want you to view your mandate broadly, the council did ask that your analysis and recommendations include the following 5 topics. First, the role of sworn and special police officers in district schools. Second, alternatives to police responses to incidents, such as community-based behavioral health or social services co-responders. Third, police discipline. Fourth, the integration of conflict resolution strategies and restorative justice practices into policing. And fifth, an analysis with recommendations of the Comprehensive Policing and Justice Reform Second Emergency Amendment Act of 2020, the bill that I referred to earlier. The law requires you to submit your recommendations to the council by year end, but I will ask the council to allow more time if necessary. I also want to be clear that if any commission member has important dissenting comments, the council will welcome their inclusion as an attachment to the report. Finally, let me touch on a few administrative details. I want the commission to be independent, yet supported by council resources. Blaine Stum on my staff will be available for support, but you do not report to him or to me or to any council member. And let me know if you feel pressure from any council member or any elected official, because I will intercede to protect your independence. In addition, the council is currently procuring a consultant or consultant organization to assist you, and they will be answerable to you for direction. This commission is a big deal. You are talented, knowledgeable individuals who care about our city, quality policing, and justice. And that is our mutual goal. Again, thank you for your willingness to serve. You're muted, Blaine.
All right, thank you, Chairman Mendelson. I don't know if the co-chairs have anything that they want to say before we dive into introductions, but I'll leave it to Robert and Christy if they have any comments they would like to make.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Robert Bobb, and I'm very pleased to serve as the co-chair for the commission and its work with my partner, Christy Lopez, and she will have something more to say a little bit later as we organize our work. As Phil Mendelson indicated, this is a very important assignment that we've all volunteered for. And that the City Council will provide us with the resources that we need and the independence that the committee deserves to have. And so I look forward to working with each of you. I had a list of members of the commission that I was to have reached out to prior to tonight's meeting, and I apologize for that, but I will be reaching out to each of you individually, some of whom many of you I've not worked with before. So I look forward to moving forward with this important work. I'll have a little bit more to say later. Christy?
Thank you, Bob. I'll just very quickly say I'm really pleased to be here. I've been tremendously inspired by the conversations with the commissioners I've spoken with so far. I'm very much looking forward to this work. I plan to work hard on this. I think this is one of the most important topics that we are facing as a community and as a nation right now. And I think that we have a window of opportunity to do something about it that we haven't had for a long time. And I've been doing this work for long enough to know that that window of opportunity will close before we expect. And so I really want all of us to be working hard to get as much done as possible during this time. And I appreciate that the council has given us the opportunity to make this happen. So thank you all for allowing me to be part of this and for being here today.
All right, thank you, Robert and Christy. Before we go into introductions from the commissioners, I just want to make a couple of comments about the agenda for today. I sent it out to folks, but just in case folks weren't able to take a look at it, we're going to go do some introductions. We're going to do commission procedures, which is a little bit about the Open Meetings Act, but also just about some of the draft procedures that were circulated with the agenda and the notice. And then we're going to go do an overview of the Enabling Act, or the legislation that basically created this commission. And then we'll go into next steps. And we're going to try to keep things on time because I bet that a lot of people have a lot of things on their plate. So we want to make sure that we're respecting everybody's time as much as possible. So I guess I'll start for introductions, and if folks could keep theirs to around a minute or so, that would be great. For those who haven't met me yet, my name is Blaine Stum. I am a legislative policy advisor to Chairman Mendelson under the Committee of the Whole. I'm originally from Spokane, Washington, and in my prior work, I did technical assistance and research in the criminal justice policy world with Council of State Governments Justice Center and the Justice Programs Office. And I will pass it to Patrice.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm Patrice Sultan with DC Justice Lab. I've been practicing criminal law in the district for the last 15 or so years and have been in front of the council asking for policing reforms for a very long time. I hope that this is a watershed moment where some of the things that we have been bringing to the council's attention for many years will finally be taken seriously and implemented. There are many, many problems that we've seen across the country that we do see here in the District of Columbia. So I guess I am sort of suggesting what the council member would not, which is that MPD and the other agencies in the city have a lot of work to do, and I'm happy to help them figure out what needs to be done. Thanks.
All right, do you want to pass it over to someone? We'll sort of do it that way.
Yeah,
That's okay.
Samantha Davis.
Thanks, Patrice.
Hi, everyone. I am Samantha Davis. I use she, they pronouns. I am the executive director of Black Swan Academy. And in that role, for the past couple of years, have been supporting youth leaders throughout the city, calling on the council to love us, don't harm us. And one way that is to remove police from schools. And when it comes to addressing policing in this city, we do have a lens that believes that we need to be moving towards abolition. And so I fully anticipate on bringing that framework to this work. I believe that both the divestment from the institution of policing, but more importantly, that the investment in Black communities to ensure that we have the resources we need to keep each other safe, to ensure that we're able to live in dignity and with love, is what is going to address a lot of the instances that we see throughout the country and also here in DC. So thank you for allowing us to be here today and looking forward to being in community with each of you. And I will pass it to Delante. Pastor Delante, forgive me.
Hey fam, no, you good. Hi everybody, my name is Delante Golston. I use he, him pronouns. I pastor a church called Peace Fellowship Church. And for the last almost 2 years, I've been one of the lead organizers of a coalition of churches, gun violence survivors, police violence survivors, called Peace Walks DC. We organize around the intersection of both state and intercommunity violence. And have been working to have the city have a campaign zero for homicides due to gun violence in this city. During the last budget cycle, we organized about 550 faith leaders and congregations from across the city to put forth what we call the Time Is Now petition calling for a 20% refund of our tax dollars from the MPD into a radical reimagining of our funds into things that we have seen through research actually work. Things like our Credible Messenger program with DYRS, things like the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement, things like the ONE's Office's Pathways program, things like radical investments in the Department of Behavioral Health. And so things like faith-based and faith-inspired advocacy and trauma-informed care around both state and intercommunity violence in our city. I am really grateful to be born in this city, raised in this city, educated in its public schools. Grateful to see folks that some of whom I've known for many years. Phil Minison knocked on my door when I had just graduated from Banneker, was about to go to college. When he was starting his first campaign, and because I had just finished taking AP History and AP Government, I said, well, I guess I ought to try it. So it's good to see now Chairman Mendelson, and I will pass the mic to, I'm just gonna go right, the person is right beneath me on the Zoom, on my Zoom, and that's, now I'm about to mess up somebody's name, and that's wrong. Sister in family, loved one, Naik apostrophe E. Can you please say your name so I don't mess it up?
This is actually more fun for me.
Because you got the day and I don't even know what you call that thing. What you call it? I don't know what you call it.
The way that my clients like to say it, just for everybody's benefit, is that it's like Nike with attitude, like Nike. So Nike is my name. Sorry, my partner's in the room. I apologize. But my name is Nike Savane. I am a guardian ad litem, now supervising attorney at the Children's Law Center here in DC. I've been there since 2014, but I am appointed to this council and commission and participating in this commission independently. I've been a resident of DC since 2010. So I moved here for law school and have had the privilege of living in various parts of the city. I'm currently in Ward 7, and as I've explained to a few of our commissioners, I'm actually like from firsthand now seeing a lot of the things that I had learned about and read about and seen in the lives of my clients every day in my community. So that's adding to my view of what I'm bringing to the table here. I really wanted to participate in this commission to ensure that we are not only addressing the direct consequences of over-policing and discriminatory policing here in the district, but also the collateral consequences that often take a back seat, but are equally destructive to communities. And I'm speaking from the perspective of somebody who has worked with children in the foster care system in DC for several years and seeing how the policing, over-policing, discriminatory policing of parents, and community members affects children as well, and the policing of the children directly themselves, as Samantha said, in the schools, but also just literally everywhere in the community. So I'm hoping that we make sure to pay attention to that as well, and include that in our analysis. And I am going to pass it over to George.
So good evening, everyone. George Lambert. I serve as President, CEO, Greater Washington Urban League. Most of you know us, but we're a civil rights social service organization at our core. I will say to you that we're really a civil rights organization. This is an issue we've had a spotlight on for a long time. I want to certainly acknowledge and say thank you to Chairman Mendelson for appointing me. Let me close on this with you. Today is really a special day for me. My youngest son and his wife gave birth to now my youngest grandson. And so the reason I say that's important is because I'm really dedicating my work on this commission to us getting this right, okay? It's important that we get this right. This is a defining moment in our country at this point. I think the stakes are high and we have to get it right. I want to get it right for my grandson. I'll stop there. Thank you. Oh, I'm passing it on to Robert Bob.
Hello, I'm Robert Bob, and I just witnessed a horrific police shooting in my home state of Louisiana. Young man by the last name of Pellerin, who was just shot 8 or 9 times in the back by police officers in Lafayette, Louisiana. I have managed a number of cities across the country. I've worked with and hired police officers and police chiefs and fired police chiefs, and have worked in municipalities where I've seen, police shootings. I've seen police officers shot and killed by members of the community. I managed a city during the height of the crack cocaine, where bodies were on the streets literally every night. Now, it actually managed a city that was known as the murder capital of the United States. And so I'm really pleased to serve on this committee. I have 3 sons, all of whom have had their tensions with police agencies from time to time, despite the fact that in some cases I managed the cities and they were in issues with the police. And so I'm really pleased. I actually volunteered to be on the committee. I didn't realize that I would be co-chairing the committee, but I'm looking forward to working with everyone. This is really a defining moment, as was stated earlier, for our community and in fact for this nation as well. Thank you. And I'll pass it over back to Christy, as a matter of fact.
Oh, I'm just going to pass. I want to hear from everybody else. I think, we'll hear from me if you haven't heard from me already. So I have to pass it to somebody. How about Kurt?
I'm Kurt Vondren. I have served for many years, I think under 4 mayors, going back to Mayor Williams, on the DC Police Complaints Board, we like to think that we have done some work for police accountability over the time since we've been established, but our mandate, of course, is much more limited than this body. So this is an opportunity, I think, to take a broader look at police accountability. The Office of Police Complaints in the District of Columbia looks at mostly individual citizen complaints against a particular police officer. We do make policy recommendations to the Metropolitan Police Department on ways to improve their accountability and their procedures. So I would also note that Bob mentioned, tragic situation in Louisiana. I've lived in the city for 43 years, but I was born and raised in Wisconsin, and the situation in Kenosha, of course, weighs very heavily on my heart, and I just almost can't understand the tragic situation there. And then I would just mention that many years ago I served as the president of the Stein Democratic Club, but that organization is now much more ably represented. Well, first it was much more ably represented by our colleague here, Jeffrey Richardson, and then currently much more ably represented by Kent. So the club has improved in its leadership over the years.
Kurt, you want to?
I will pass it on to Jeffrey Richardson.
Thank you, Kurt. Hi, everybody. I'm Jeffrey Richardson. I'm a Ward 7 resident. I have held various volunteer roles in the community, as Kurt mentioned, including president of the Gertrude Stein Democratic Club, as well as vice chair of the DC Democratic Party. I had the honor of serving in the Gray administration as director of the Mayor's Office of LGBT Affairs, where I worked very closely with MPD around hate crimes and other constituent services issues. And after that, I had the honor of serving as the district's first chief of service officer and running the Mayor's Office of Volunteerism, where I worked with Fire and EMS and MPD and HTMA around volunteer and emergency management. I'm a social worker by training, and I'm excited to sort of bring that perspective. It's been about 15 years ago when I was working in schools in Ward 8, where I started actual cleanup initiative in Oxen Run Park. And that started because I was working with 4th and 5th grade boys who said they never played in the park or parkland because they were afraid of jump outs. And that really started my work with youth and community service in DC. And I'm just honored to bring that perspective, both my work internally to government and my community work, particularly as we look at both policy and practice, that we can also take some cultural considerations that have also impacted our community in the relationship with the police. So thank you. And I'll pass it to Corey.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Corey Knight, and I'm Executive Director for the Hope Foundation Reentry Network, which is a reentry program that I started after during my time in incarceration. And I work solely over the Department of Corrections right now with the residents at the Department of Corrections, where we're not in there right now. And I've been doing this for about 12 years, working with the residents at the Department of Corrections. We are a mentoring and coaching program that do healing, restoration, and recovery. I'm certified in a couple of different things. I'm certified life coach, recovery coach, parenting instructor, anger management instructor, and financial coach, finance. So I bring a handful of different services to people that need it. We work inside and outside the Department of Corrections. I also run a youth program in the Congress Heights area in Ward 8. I'm also a Ward 8 resident. So, I'm just here to see where I fit in at and try to, provide, my expertise in whatever capacity that I can. Also part of the Commission on Reentry and Return of Citizens, which we just got one of the legislations passed to help people with convicted felons are able to vote now. Starting can vote November. That's incarcerated in Department of Corrections right now. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what this commission can do and how we can just make things better for community members and citizens in District of Columbia. Thank you. And I'll pass it to Patrice Sutton.
Yeah. When I'm ready, I'll pass it to.
Oh, okay. All right. Kent is Kent.
Yeah. Okay. I'll take it.
All right.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks. My name is Kent Bass. Again, it's a lovely name to have because it's pronounced exactly the way it's not spelled. So a little bit about me. I current president of the Gertrude Stein Democratic Club, as has been mentioned. I'm currently on the advisory board of the Mayor's Office of LGBTQ Affairs. Pronouns are he, him, but I think for the purposes of this commission, perhaps the reason I'm here is because I'm a long-serving ANC commissioner on ANC 1A. I'm wrapping up my 10th year. Looks like I'm unopposed for 2 more, so be careful what you ask for. I've been chair for over 7 years. The area that I've been honored to serve is Columbia Heights, Georgia Avenue communities of Pleasant Plains and Parkview. We've seen our fair share of violence, and I'll be honest, we have been with the community struggling on trying to find good solutions, and we definitely want to embrace best practices. We think that there are significant areas to improve. A small example from my perspective is, for instance, when people have been drinking too much and they're passed out on the plaza, I don't know why the police are the ones showing up. I just don't understand that. I don't think that's the right response for the right situation. And I think that we have lots of little things like that that add up to creating outcomes that are less than desired and distrust in the community as well. So I think is hopefully what people will learn from me is I tend to dig into research and facts and try to pull it all together and listen to everybody and try to come up with what I think are the best solutions, not necessarily the solutions I personally like, because I recognize that there's a responsibility on commissions like this, that we're representing everybody trying to achieve the best and not necessarily personal agendas. So with that, I think hopefully I'm choosing someone that hasn't spoken before, and that would be LaShonda Hill.
No, I have not. Good evening, everyone. My name is LaShonda Hill. I currently serve as Executive Director of the Office for Students in the Care of DC within the Deputy Mayor for Education's office here in the district. My work there focuses on education, workforce development services, and supports for students who come in contact with the child welfare and the justice system. Previously, I have committed my work and my career to focusing on the creating opportunity for young people who specifically come in contact with the justice system through technical assistance. I've done direct service for young people and families who are transitioning out of correctional settings or residential treatment, and really was very, very excited to join this body and work with all of you. I have a sort of personal commitment to utilizing data and research and evidence, but also leveraging the expertise of those with lived experience of systems and policies. And I really look forward to working with all of you to bring all of that together, to hopefully put together a set of recommendations and solutions here in the district that not just sort of focus on problem solving, but also create opportunity and empower communities so that we can really realize what real public safety looks like. So I look forward to working with all of you. And with that, I will pass it off to Elena, Principal Bell.
Hi, everyone. LaShawna, I knew that was coming. Good to see you. I haven't seen her in 10 years. I think we went to grad school together. So good to see you and really good to be on this call with everyone. I'm Elena Bell, the current principal of Tacoma Education Campus, DC Public School in Ward 6. Also coming from Ward 4, the former principal of the Capitol Hill Cluster School, Peabody and Watkins. I started my education journey in Atlanta Public Schools as a teacher, as an instructional coach, moved to Boston and then to Chicago Public Schools. I have a commitment to urban public schools, urban school settings, to provide our students the best and the brightest opportunities. And so I'm grateful to be a part of the conversation. I think far too often educators are left out of the conversation. And so I think it's really important to engage in what police reform and police supports look like on school campuses as it relates to either our security or our sworn officers and what that relationship looks like. I'm bringing to this work just a perspective of how we are aligning our actions with our beliefs currently around redefining our approach to discipline, policies, the supports for social emotional learning for students, and really thinking, I think going back to what Samantha said, how are we investing in schools proactively and what that support looks like. So thank you all so much for having me, and I look forward to our work together. Oh, I'm gonna pass it to, I was gonna pass it to LaShonda, but she got to me first. Let's go with Herb. Have you gone yet, Herb?
No, I have not. Thank you so much, Isabel. Appreciate that. I was waiting patiently. But thank you so much for giving me a call, shout out. But I've enjoyed just listening to everyone, and I look forward to being another person that tries to think about what's best for Washington, D.C. My name is Herb Gray, and I own a mental health care company called Life Enhancement Services. We've been here in the district now almost 10 years. I think another month or two would be 10 years. And so we service children, adults, families, throughout every ward in the city. We work with about 800 people each and every week, and we provide counseling and therapy services for those people. Many times people we work with have had various interactions with police, and so I understand some of those difficult situations that take place, and I would love to just share with my experience and what we've worked with, and also share with what I think maybe would work well for our city and for the residents of Washington, D.C. So again, thank you so much for choosing me, and I'm looking forward to serve. Now I have to find somebody else. Lord have mercy. Ron Hampton, I think, is gone, and with somebody to say, I have not gone, that would help me out a little bit here.
I don't think
Emily, how are you doing? Okay, I got you. Welcome on.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. My name is Emily Gunston. I use she, hers pronouns. I currently am senior counsel to the Attorney General for the District of Columbia. I'm here in my capacity representing the Office of the Attorney General. Prior to that, I was the Deputy Legal Director for Criminal Legal System Reform at the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs, where I engaged in litigation and policy work around all aspects of criminal legal system reform in the DC area. Before that, I was at the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice with Ms. Christy Lopez. for about 9 years, where most of what I did was investigated police departments and sought to eliminate patterns or practices of police misconduct. I investigated the Chicago Police Department. I worked on investigating and reforming the New Orleans Police Department, the Cleveland Division of Police, and others. And before that, I was a public defender in the Bay Area of California for 8 years. I'm really honored to be here. I am really looking forward to working with and learning from all of you in helping to make our city more just, more equitable, and safer for everyone who lives and visits Washington, D.C. Thank you. And I will, has anybody not gone yet?
I haven't.
Ms. Smith, pass it to you.
Hello. I figured most people were trying to figure out how to pronounce my name, so they were finding all the easier names first. So hello, everyone. My name is Mignon, just like filet, but Mignon Smith. Mignon is actually a French name, and it means petite, in case you're wondering. I'm really excited to serve on the commission. I think this work is extremely important. I am an educator here in the city and have been in the district for a total of 6 years. And as you can imagine, as an educator, you're often having to explain to young people, especially Black and Brown, like why we continue to see a lot of the same patterns around policing, and it sends the message that their lives are not important and their lives are not valued. So I am here because I care about Black and Brown kids who look like me and, you know, other members of my family. And so I want to make sure that I am a part of helping to get this work right. So I'm really excited to be here. Thank you. And am I passing it to someone? I think, what, Tina?
Thank you. I want to apologize about not being on camera. I actually just had surgery on Monday, so I'm definitely not going to be on camera. So I also wanted to do an excited shout out. I did not know my ANC person is here. Okay, I'm gonna ask you all the questions. Yes. All right, my name is Tina Front. I'm the executive director and founder of Courtney's House. So I've been in DC. I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois. And I've been in DC since the Golden Dome on 14th Street. How about that? So if you know about the Golden Dome on 14th Street, then we all know together. So Courtney's House has been around for about 11 years. We work with boys and girls who are sex trafficked. Sex trafficking is my only population, ages 11 to 24, average age 11 to 17. Youth who are in foster care or go to Hope Court or are in the DC DMV area. And one of the reasons I'm glad that I am on this as well is, yes, we currently work with youth who are obviously incarcerated when they shouldn't be. But, you know, my background would be growing up in foster care, growing up in Chicago, and then also being incarcerated and also being sex trafficked and also having police brutality. So I think bringing those assets are really, I'm going to ditto what everyone else said, definitely removing police out of the school system. The FD12 process of learning what mental health looks like and having mental health workers, and really just dittoing everyone, especially about Black and Brown youth. And I want to say, I would definitely say, see a difference with our girls being trafficked and them trying not to touch the juvenile system, but our boys being trafficked and touching the juvenile system. So talking about that and what that looks like. Thank you. Oh, and did everyone go? Am I the last one at the party?
Ron and Bob Bennett still.
Okay, Ron, come on up to the party.
Thank you very much. My name is Ronald Hampton. I am first of all, I'm a retired police officer. I worked in the Metropolitan Police Department for 24 years. I also led the National Black Police Association for 23 years. And that was after I left the police department. And I've sort of worked in the area of police, and I don't like to use the word reform because I don't think reform has worked. There's no evidence that reform has worked. Let me put it that way. And I've been involved in working on these issues for an awful long time. So the idea that now we're going to do this in light of the other things that have happened all over the country is very, I'm very interested in that. And I'm also open for change because I recognize that the system needed to be changed when I was doing it back in, I served on the police department from 1970 to 1994. So I recognized that the system needed to be changed then. It wasn't new to me. And that was what really we worked on at the National Black Police Association, trying to do just that, change the system, not only for those in the police departments, nationally and as well as internationally, but we wanted to change for the citizens because it did not, and particularly our community and the Brown community, it did not serve the needs of our community. We ran into obstacles all the time, which police unions tended to be those obstacles, along with other obstacles, the systemic racism, all of that. So the idea that we now, not only here in this country, in the city, but in the country, get a chance to talk about what policing should look like in the next decade, because change isn't going to come easy, number one. And I agree with Christy that this window isn't going to be open long, and we shouldn't be procrastinating and messing around with trying to get something together to do it, because it's going to close. People aren't going to. It's not going to stay open long enough. I mean, forever. And so with that, I'm just excited about the opportunity to do this because this is part of my life's work, and I look forward to doing it. So thank you.
I believe Mr. Bennett. I think you're still muted, Mr. Bennett. Nope, there we go. I unmuted you. You should be good.
Oh, thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Well, it looks like I'm the oldest one by far on this panel. So I look forward to listening to all of you and your experiences, which are very considerable. I was a federal prosecutor here in Washington for a number of years, and Mr. Hampton, you look familiar to me, so we might have had a case together or something. So I've dealt with police issues from that perspective, but I've also been a practicing criminal defense lawyer here for 50 plus years. And so I see it from that perspective too. I think there are short-term efforts that we can make that I think can make a considerable difference. But I also think there are long-term considerations. So I look forward to working with all of you. I'm married. My wife and I have been married for 50 years. I have 3 daughters and 6 grandchildren, all of whom live here in the district, a city we love. So I have a personal interest in seeing to it that I at least try to do something to leave this city a little better place than when I came. So thank you for allowing me into this youthful club, and I look forward to working with all of you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bennett. I think everybody has gone, is that correct? Christy, I didn't know if you wanted to, you sort of passed a little bit, but you're good? Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up? Okay. we were having issues before, so I want to make sure before we go into this part. So thank you again, everybody, for introducing yourself. It's wonderful that all of you are willing to participate on this commission and bring the experiences and expertise that you bring. And we're very thankful that you're here. And I just want to note that for the record. I'm going to share my screen because we're going to talk a little bit about some of the Open Meetings Act stuff and some procedural stuff really quick, just so that way you're aware. And I'll share some of these materials after the meeting with folks and upload them to the Dropbox folder that I created for the commission. If you haven't already gotten the link for the Dropbox, let me know, and I'll make sure to shoot it over to you. Let me get this started. All right. Can everybody see the screen? Yes? Thumbs up? Okay, good. So I'm going to walk you through some Open Meetings Act stuff really quick, just so that way you all have an idea of what it entails. When we asked our general counsel if this Police Reform Commission was a public body, they replied that yes, it is. And so if there is a quorum present, which means 11 or more members, then it has to be open to the public under the Open Meetings Act. And so what does that mean for the commission? In terms of what that means, first, it means that we have to notice the meeting 48 hours or 2 business days prior to the meeting, unless it's an emergency meeting, and whichever of those is greater. So if 2 business days is greater than 48 hours, then we have to notice it 2 business days beforehand. And we notice it a couple of different ways. First, in an office that's readily accessible to the public. 2, on a website, like the council website that the public can access and look at the notice. And then 3, in the District of Columbia Register, which they'll publish it as soon as it's possible. The first requirement in terms of making sure it's in an office that's readily accessible is not applicable during this public health emergency. And I just want to make sure folks know that. The other piece here is that after we notice it, how do we make sure that it's accessible to the public? Under normal circumstances, it would be that the public has to be permitted to be physically present. The news media has to be able to be physically present, and the meeting has to be televised. Since we are in a public health emergency, the protocols are a little different here. And what our law states essentially is that the body must take reasonably calculated steps to allow the public to view or hear the meeting. In this case, what that often means is including like a Zoom link or something in the notice so folks can attend when the meeting's on or register for the meeting prior to the meeting to be able to view it. We're also live streaming this via Facebook, which is another way we're making it accessible to the public. So that's what we tend to do for public health emergencies. Since this meeting is taking place electronically, I just wanted to highlight this as well. And that is the fact that if a meeting is held via electronic means, that means the meeting must be recorded, which is why at the beginning of this, I noted to everyone that this meeting's being recorded. And technically, all votes are supposed to be taken by roll call. So when the commission gets to a point where it's going to vote on things, you'll want to do that via roll call. And I can walk folks through what that looks like if you have any questions there. As far as the recordings of the meetings, those must be available within 7 business days of the meeting. And minutes that are taken by folks who, like myself right now, who are staffing the commission, those have to be posted within 3 days. Those timeframes are told right now during the public health emergency, but I would still advocate that the commission, and I'll certainly try to get the recording and the minutes up as soon as possible, but definitely moving forward, the contractor who staffs it, we're going to recommend that they follow those to the extent that they can. Does anybody have questions on those specific requirements? No? Okay. I'm going to jump to another just quick little section here on the Open Meetings Act. This one is about closing the meeting. So sometimes public bodies have to close meetings, but in our Open Meetings Act law, there are only 14 reasons that a meeting can be closed. So it has to be for one of these 14 reasons. I'm not going to go through them all. This, like I said, I'll give you a sort of a nice little summary sheet of all of this after the meeting. The one that will probably apply to the commission, because a lot of this is about, discussing like negotiations or employee discipline or, something that like a law or court order would require it closed. And I don't really see that happening here. But if you're going to do any trainings where you want just commission members and you don't want the public to sort of see what's going on because you want it to be a closed meeting where you feel comfortable just saying, whatever during the training and getting the training in an uninterrupted environment, then you would want to close the meeting. And to do that, you have to do very specific steps. First, you have to open the meeting publicly, and then a majority of the commission, so 11 commission members, would have to vote to close the meeting. So somebody would have to make a motion, and then that motion would have to be voted on. Second, after the motion passes, let's say all commissioners unanimously support closing the meeting for a training, the chair or the co-chairs in this instance, one of them, would have to make a statement saying, pursuant to Open Meetings Act, the commission has voted to close the remainder of the meeting due to X. So in this case, it would be to train and develop members of the public body and staff. And so those are two things that you have to do before you can close the meeting. After you're done closing and everything's done, the vote and the statement have to be recorded in the minutes and posted online for the public to be able to see. So those are the general requirements of the Open Meetings Act. I realize I went through those pretty quickly, but does anybody have any questions about those requirements before we move on to some of the more procedural stuff? Naike?
Hi, yes, just one question. Are the chats and all of that during these recorded meetings, are those also published? And do they include all of the chats?
No, the chats are not published. It's the, to my knowledge, it's the video feed that's published. So I don't know that we have the functionality to do the chats.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to jump in here if I may. I believe the chats would be foilable if there's a record of them.
Any other questions? I don't see any. All right. Now I'm going to, can folks see a PDF document come up on the screen? No? Okay, let me take care of this really quick. All right, how about now? Yes, all right, good, good. So these I sent out with the agenda and the meeting notice. These are just draft procedures for the commission, and they're not meant to be all encompassing because I'm sure there are some things that the commission members will want to talk about. So what I'm going to do is just go through these briefly, and then I thought it would be good for folks to be able to have some time to look at them, and then maybe at the next meeting we can vote on those procedures after folks have had time to provide feedback and any suggestions that they would like to offer. The first part of this is just the name and purpose, which is of course in the law. The second article here just goes over the membership. As per the law, there's 20 members, and then there are 2 co-chairs that have been selected by the chairman. The law said a chairperson, but it gave him some discretion to do co-chairs as well. And then this just is language that's pretty standard for most commissions in the district in terms of how the co-chairs perform their duties, which is presiding at the meetings, establishing subcommittees that are determined by the commission, and then performing any other duties that the commission may delegate. Article 3 here is primarily stuff we just went over on the Public Meetings Act requirements. I'll just note that I did include something here about agendas and notices being emailed to commissioners at least 48 hours before the meeting, because I think it's good for folks to have some, so that way you're not getting something like 24 hours in advance or a couple hours in advance. So if there's other requirements that you would like to see there, let me know. I know some commissions have a longer requirement, but I think trying to balance between getting the commissioner stuff quickly, but also making sure that it's not so close to the meeting that you don't have a chance to look at it at all. Then we have just a section about co-chairs being able to cancel a meeting if a quorum's not present, and the requirements to do that, which would include a notice being posted, and then the notice being emailed to commissioners and to any members of the public who request regular updates of the commission's work. The conduct of the meeting is really just about how the co-chairs sort of establish things. So them being able to determine the order of business and then work with staff, which for right now is me, but then will be the contractor later, to come up with an agenda. We also wanted to make sure that there's a part in the agenda where commissioners at future meetings are able to say like, hey, we would like to talk about this at the next meeting. Can you please include this item so that way we can bring it up in the next month's meeting or next week's meeting or however long you want to push that off. But we want to make sure that commissioners have an opportunity to suggest things. This is just sort of boilerplate language that you have to comply with the Open Meetings Act law, along with encouraging participation from folks. I didn't put any specific requirements around public engagement for the commission because I think that's a conversation for you as commissioners to have amongst each other about how you want to engage with the public and what communities and individuals you would like to engage with. So if there's particular communities you want to do outreach to, if it's trans people, if it's sex workers, if it's undocumented folks, that's definitely something that I think is a conversation for the commission to have and not for the procedures to sort of dictate. Then there's just the establishment of sort of the co-chairs basically deciding questions, which is pretty standard. And that anything that's not covered in here would be covered by Robert's Rules of Order, which folks don't need to necessarily know all that kind of stuff. But for those who do, it's always a handy tool. A quorum obviously is 11 commissioners, as I had mentioned earlier. So I won't spend any time there. The commission members in these procedures would need to be present, which in this case means that we would have to be able to hear you for doing any votes, and this would mean that votes by proxy, so designating someone to vote for you or something like that wouldn't be allowed. There's a little bit of language about motion to reconsider and sort of what that means and how that can be made. So motion to reconsider, basically a vote. If a vote fails, then you can do a motion to reconsider at the same meeting, at the same meeting where the original vote was taken, or you can bring it up at the next meeting, but it has to be brought up by a commissioner who is on the prevailing side of the question. This allows the commission, like I said, I would advise roll call votes for things, but especially in the subcommittee process, if there are subcommittees who decide they want to do like any sort of voting procedures to get through their work, we wanted to give them the flexibility to do, voice votes, show of hands, or any other means that the commission sort of determines necessary. And then finally, we have Articles 8 and 9, which deal with minutes being taken at the meeting and being distributed to commissioners at the next meeting. It would actually be prior to the next meeting. And final recommendations. I do note that the commission may, by a majority vote, request an extension of the timeline. So when Chairman Mendelson mentioned earlier that we could ask council to extend that, that would be by a majority vote of the commission. And then finally, we have sort of the process through which final recommendations are determined. I didn't put anything prescriptive in here because I think the commission members, I think that's something that you all should be able to discuss and determine what you feel comfortable with. So the process of how you get to those recommendations and how those are reported and captured, I think that's something that I didn't want to be super prescriptive on just because we're sort of getting all of this rolling and I didn't know what folks would be comfortable with. But that's it on the procedure side. Does anybody have any questions about this? Like I said, I'm gonna resend, and then if folks have comments, suggestions, feedback, please send it to me and the co-chairs via email after this meeting, and up until the next meeting, and we'll try to incorporate those comments and suggestions into the document, and hopefully be able to get something to you to vote on at the next meeting. Samantha?
Just want to clarify, are you suggesting that we not discuss any of this now and that we communicate via email to you all?
I think that would be best, just because of a tight timeline, if that's okay.
Sure. That's okay for me.
Okay. Did anybody else have any other questions? Not seeing any. So with that said, I'm going to move over. Oh, Robert?
I don't have a question. I'm just waiting to get to the next.
Okay. So we're going to move to the next piece of this then. And this will be basically the overview of the law that created the commission. Can folks see the law right now on their screens? Yes? Okay, good. So before I dig into this a little bit, I just want to note that what is in effect right now is the emergency legislation. Emergency legislation in the district per the Home Rule Act can be enacted after the mayor approves it with no congressional review period. For any temporary or permanent bills, there is a congressional review period that is required under the Home Rule Act. So the temporary act for this, which is identical to the emergency, will go into effect after 60-day review period by Congress, and then it will be in effect for 225 days. Emergency legislation is in effect for 90 days. And so I'm going to take you sort of bit by bit through this. I might go quickly on some other things just because some of it's self-explanatory. But if there's questions throughout this, please don't hesitate to just interrupt me as I try to get through this if you have any questions or comments. So first, we have the section on prohibition of using neck restraints. This actually updates a law from 1985 that prohibited what we called trachea holds, carotid artery holds, sleeper holds. This was passed, like I said, 1985 or 1986 actually, technically was when it was signed. And what it does is it strikes these two definitions here and inserts a definition of the neck restraint to basically cover all of these different holds. Because right now it's, trachea hold, arm bar hold, bar arm hold. And so there's a lot of repetitiveness there, and this simplifies it to neck restraint. And so that would be paragraph number 3 under these first two. It also does something in terms of rewriting section 4 of the act, which is this section here, 5125.03. It rewrites most of this to be a little bit simpler and more succinct. But what it really does, two things that I want to just make sure people are aware of, is that it makes it unlawful to use a neck restraint. This basically says it shall be prohibited under any circumstances except, so it leaves room for people to use those holds in other circumstances. So there's sort of an out there. The language in the Emergency Act is simply, it is unlawful. So there's no except in that. It also increases the penalties for officers who do not comply with this section. So right now, as you'll see, a police officer who does not comply with this section is subject to potentially a $5,000 fine, imprisonment not exceeding 1 year, or both. Under the current emergency, that is increased to up to 10 years of imprisonment, and depending on how long that imprisonment occurs, the judge would then look to our act here to determine the fine amount. So if it's, 5 years but less than 1 year, then they would get fined $12,500. If it's 10 years but not more than 5, or more than 5, then it's $25,000. So it depends on what the sentence is for that individual officer or officers. The other thing that I forgot to mention here is that the law makes it so an officer who sees another officer apply a neck restraint but doesn't intervene or doesn't try to resuscitate or provide aid or doesn't request emergency medical services is also guilty of violating this section. Under the old act, it was only a violation if they applied the neck restraint themselves and then failed to provide any sort of aid. So I'm going to scroll.
Why?
Oh, Delonte?
Yeah, I go by Pastor Delonte.
Pastor Delonte, sorry.
I want to just I want to thank you for just taking us through how far we've gotten so far. I just want to kind of state that I think it might be helpful for you to, as you're leading us through I guess digging us into the weeds of the ways in which our bodies are assaulted and the ways in which our bodies are met with violence. I think it might be just helpful for the viewing public. There would be some sort of a recognition that the language that we're using, even in the law, can cause folks to re-experience trauma, and that in the effort for us to go into the sort of the interstices of the law, that we are by no means trivializing the raw ways in which the bodies of Black and brown and queer and trans human beings in our city are very much impacted by the language that we're using. And I just want, before we go too much farther in using this language as a matter of course, I just want to make sure that there is a public recognition that this language is triggering, that this language is triggering to people who have experienced trauma. And just because we might be a gathering of, I guess, experts on this matter, that part of our expertise is trauma-informed public service. So I just want to make sure that that is just noted, if that's all right.
Thank you, Pastor Delonte, and I apologize for not making that statement prior to digging into all this. So definitely want to be aware of that and try to do our best, and I'll do my best moving forward to make sure that that's something that's recognized.
Thank you, I really appreciate that.
So I'm going to jump over to body-worn cameras really quick. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this one, other than to say that the interactions piece, so it amends how basically the public can see body-worn cameras and when the mayor has to release it and when the chair of the Judiciary and Public Safety Committee can request it. In this case, it updates paragraph 3 here to say that not only do they have to make the number of investigations public for failure to use body-worn cameras, but they also have to make the results of that investigation and any discipline that was taken as a result of the investigation public as well. As I had mentioned, it inserts a new subsection into this law that requires MPD to provide unredacted body-worn camera footage to the chair of Judiciary and Public Safety 5 days after they request it. And it also requires the mayor to release body-worn camera footage within 5 business days after any sort of officer-involved shooting, shooting by a police officer, and use of serious force, and it requires them to publicly name the officers involved. And this was retroactively applied to deaths sent by police since October 1st, 2014. And I'll just flag for folks that the police union has sued the city over the particular provision requiring release of body-worn camera footage after use of force incidents. They wanted a temporary restraining order to keep the mayor from being able to release the footage. So the temporary restraining order was not, the motion was not approved. So I don't know what their next step is, but I will definitely keep commission members aware of sort of any goings on with that lawsuit. And just recognizing too that the mayor, as a result of this law, released some edited body-worn camera footage regarding the cases of Marquise Alston, Jeffrey Price, and Daquan Young. The other piece of this requires MPD to consult with an organization that has expertise in trauma-informed care and grief on best practices to determine sort of how next of kin can view footage. Because as everyone can imagine, that would be very traumatizing and triggering to see, particularly for family members who are having to see this and be re-traumatized by that experience. It finally updates the DC municipal regulations, which are found under dcregs.dc.gov. And the body-worn camera footage piece is in Title 24, and it basically makes it consistent with this law, but in addition adds a requirement where police officers are prohibited from reviewing their body-worn camera recordings or recordings shared with them to assist in any initial report writing. So they couldn't go back to body-worn camera footage to write a police report on an incident that occurred. And then I'm going to jump here really quick to the next one, unless anybody has any comments or questions on that. I'll be sending out a summary document with all this information, so you don't have to read through the entire law if you don't want to, with citations so folks can jump around and see where things are at. So subtitle,
Blaine,
yeah.
sorry,
Go ahead.
you can continue. I just wanted to make sure before I forgot, I did mention in the chat, when you send that out to us, if you can also send out the older version of this legislation that had more restrictions and had some stronger languages for us to review at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. The first emergency, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to do that. So the subtitle C, this expands the membership of the Police Complaints Board. Currently it's composed of 5 members, one of whom is an officer with MPD. This section expands it to 9 people and removes the MPD seat from the Police Complaints Board. And then it also gives the executive director of the Office of Police Complaints discretion to start an investigation if they find misconduct or violations of the law from officers in the course of looking at other complaints. So if a citizen makes a complaint that officers used excessive force against them to the Police Complaints Board and the executive director finds other misconduct was also taking place, they could then initiate a complaint even if the citizen who sent them the original complaint didn't mention that other misconduct. The second part of this is subtitle D. This expands the use of force review board. The use of force review board is not found in district statute. It's actually a creation of the general orders that are issued by the chief of police, by the Metropolitan Police Department. So it's on your screen right now. I'll definitely upload this to the Dropbox folder for folks. What this section does is expands it from 7 to 13 members. And when it was 7 members, a couple of those members, one of those members had to be basically FOP, Fraternal Order of Police. This removes the Fraternal Order of Police member from the Use of Force Review Board, and then directs the council and the mayor to appoint 5 individuals to the board. The mayor gets 3 appointments. Then they must be someone who has experienced use of force, DC resident, and an attorney who is in good standing with the district bar. And then the council gets 2 appointments, one of which is somebody with subject matter expertise in criminal justice policy, and then the other is someone with subject matter expertise in oversight of law enforcement and use of force. The next section, which is subtitle E, removes what we call the anti-mask law, which I know can be somewhat confusing here, so I'm going to bring this up. So under our code, if you trespass with like the intent to deprive someone of something, or use like the threat, or intent to use threat of force, if you do that while wearing a mask or a hood, that's actually an additional crime under the code before this was passed. So this repeals all of this section right here to make it so that it is no longer a crime. It also removes references in the criminal code regarding penalties, because it was considered a misdemeanor, and it removes provision that would allow officers to arrest someone without a warrant for this quote unquote crime. Subtitle F, which I won't spend too much time on at the moment. This is limitations on consent searches. This basically outlines what officers have to do in circumstances where they don't have a warrant or they don't have a court order allowing them access to, like a private residence, a car, any sort of search. So this tells them that when it's based on someone's consent, here's what you have to do. You have to advise the subject of certain things. You have to make sure that if they are deaf or hard of hearing, or if they don't speak English or speak English as a second language, that they have interpretation available so they can actually understand what's going on. And you also have to make sure that the officer knows that, or the person knows that at any time they could say that they no longer consent. So that way the officer couldn't continue to conduct the search if the person removes consent in that process. I will note that this is based on an article by I think it's Georgetown law professor, Cynthia Lee, and I'll upload that to the Dropbox folder. She has talked to the chairman and I would definitely advise folks to read the article when they get the chance, or reach out to her. I'll provide her contact information as well. This section, subtitle G, updates some of the education requirements for police. In our code, we have certain requirements for police in terms of education, what they have to learn about when they're doing continuing education. And it does a couple of things. It makes it so they're learning about racism and white supremacy in addition to bias policing. It makes sure that they're learning about the limiting of use of force and employing de-escalation tactics, because right now it just says use of force instead of saying limiting the use of force. And it also makes sure that they are taught about the prohibition on the use of neck restraints. In addition, it adds two new paragraphs about obtaining consent for consent searches, and making sure that officers are aware and learn about their duty to report misconduct of their colleagues, which is not currently part of their continuing education. I'm going to scroll through here, which I should also mention really quick that it also expands the district's police officer standards and training board. That's a board that's actually in our code. The board is basically mandated to come up with the curriculum and look at what's should be the standard for cops in the district. Right now it's 11 people. This would expand it. This expands it to 15. And the new slots are for folks with expertise in juvenile justice reform, criminal defense, and prevention, violence prevention, and they would be appointed by the mayor. This subtitle, really briefly, this is about identification of MPD officers during First Amendment assemblies. Right now, the language talks about making sure that their badge and ID is identifiable, but this also makes it so the uniforms and helmets of the officers that are at these First Amendment assemblies identify which law enforcement agency they're with. I'm sure folks were aware that during some of the protests here in DC, there were, I think, some law enforcement officials brought in from Bureau of Prisons who did not have any easily identifiable sort of insignia or anything on them. So it was one of those things where I know I was down there thinking, like, who are these people? I'm going to move on to right to a jury trial. I might have to actually stop here unless, Christy, do you think we should keep going, or do you want to?
I would be interested to hear, obviously, what Bob's view is, but also what the rest of the commission. I think we have a couple of things we wanted to get to quickly, but we do,
Yeah.
I think there is utility in going through the legislation. We could begin the next meeting by going through the rest of the legislation. We could very quickly hit the next steps part of this and then go back to this if we have time. I'm not sure what people think. You know, 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Yeah,
Bob, do you have a?
Yeah, I would agree with that. We wanted to have a hard stop at 7:30. We have a couple of other things we want to move forward with the commission on if we can.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I'll stop the screen share. We're at subtitle I, and like I said, I'll be sending out just a summary of all of this. But in addition, with Samantha's comments, I'm also going to make sure that you have access to the first bill that was passed that has some different language in it from this second emergency, because there were some changes there that folks should be aware of, which I'll also make sure is in the summary document, just so folks have a quick reference for that.
And if everyone's okay with that, we'll put on the next agenda. We'll start with, or somewhere in the first couple items. We'll make sure we finish going through legislation. Does that work for people? Good. Okay. I see no vigorous no's and some nods. So okay.
Well, that sounds good, because now the hard work begins, right?
Yeah. Thank you, Blaine. By the way,
we're just about to start the hard work. Just a quick summary. We did put out a request for a proposal for a consulting firm to work with the commission. The response is due 1 September. And also the RFP is posted on the district's website, on the city council's website, if you've not seen it. Otherwise, we can, as Blaine, send each of you a link to the RFP. And we would hope that we would have a team working on behalf of the commission by, I would say, by mid-September. But I'll turn it over to Christy, because the next phase of our work is really important, and we really need your input and your guidance. And then I'll speak with respect to our next meeting.
Thanks so much, Bob. Yeah, I think that whomever we have on as staff for the commission is going to be obviously of really critical importance. They're going to help us not only with things like the logistics and writing the report, but they're also going to help us gather information that we need, the data that we need, both from the components within DC, the city or the police department, but elsewhere. So really, we should use them as a resource. Bob and I have talked about how to tackle this very broad topic with this very large commission. And we have come up with an idea that we want to propose to you. And I will send out the names of the subcommittees we're proposing with a little bit of information about them, but we just wanted to go over them verbally very quickly. We're thinking about having 5 subcommittees Each subcommittee would have 7 people on it, and each commissioner would serve on 2 subcommittees. The idea is to allow them to be focused enough so that we can really dig in and go deep on some of these issues, but not have them be so discrete that things are siloed and people might have more of a risk of duplicating efforts or not just taking advantage of similar issues. That said, I don't know that we have these subcommittees right. We did the best that we could based on our knowledge of policing and knowledge of community building and looking at the legislation. And so but if there are concerns about this, or even if you just don't like the name, please those are things we should talk about at our next meeting. And also you can email Bob and I to give us feedback. The first subcommittee, these are no particular order, but first on my list is police in schools or policing youth. We think that's police and their interactions with youth is a lot of policing, and police in schools is a big issue here in DC. So we wanted to have an entire subcommittee dedicated to that. Obviously there's overlap and interrelations between intersections between each of these subcommittees as well. Oh my goodness, and I just want to all acknowledge that Pastor Delante's beautiful child has joined us and is making this a much better meeting than it was only a few moments ago. Look at that smile. Anyway, secondly, the second subcommittee is assessing and expanding violence reduction efforts. And that's really meant to look at some different approaches, some additional approaches to reducing violence besides some of the traditional policing ways that we've seen. And DC has some of these already in place. Blaine uploaded an article today about a initiative that runs through the Office of Attorney General that's had some success here in DC, and there are similar programs across the country. The mayor's office of ONESI has, I think that's how you say it, the acronym, also is a similar, has some similar approaches. There's lots and lots of different violence intervention sorts of modes that I'm hoping we can really dig into and see which ones we can help amplify here in the district. And I think in violence reduction, what I was thinking about is primarily gun violence and sort of domestic violence and intimate violence. But there are other things, of course, as well, but a lot of programs are focused on those things. I just don't want to let domestic violence get lost in the, as we talk, everyone talks about gun violence, which is obviously quite important, but domestic violence is a little different. We make sure we're being intentional about considering that, I think. The third is building up non-police responses to social problems. One of the examples I'll provide to you are mental health and behavioral crises, homelessness, drug addiction. These are things, it sort of goes back, I believe that it was Kent who said earlier, why do we have police responding to persons who are passed out drunk, right? That's sort of the way we've always done things, but maybe there's other ways to do them, right? So again, there's obviously some overlap with the violence reduction, but that's, there's a reason why that's separate, but we should all think about whether that makes sense. The fourth one is reforms to MPD practices. And that's where we'll be looking at a lot of things like just the force, stops and searches, the consent search questions that Patrice has already been raising, the recruitment, the training, what kinds of training, all those sorts of things. If you want to really dig into those issues, that's your committee. And then the fifth one is MPD accountability and oversight. Again, obviously some overlap, but that committee will look at everything from the collective bargaining agreement and the union to the operations of the Office of Police Complaints, and other ideas that people have for body-worn cameras, for things that we use and are thinking about ways to provide internal and external oversight to the police department. So those are we'll send those around. People should provide us your top 3 choices. We will very much try to give everybody their top 2. So rank them, put them in order that you would like to be on them. If everyone signs up for one and nobody signs up for another, we'll have to revisit that. And we may or may not have our first mutiny on our hands very quickly, but hopefully we'll be able to work something out. And again, if the categories aren't making sense to you, or you think, so once you see them, I'm going to have some bullet points under each of them so that you'll be able to get a better idea of what, at least in my view and in Bob's view, fit in each of these categories. You'll be able to maybe have a better sense of whether there's something missing. or things in the wrong place that don't make sense, please just get back to us and we'll figure it out how to make it make sense. But the idea is simply to just try to break down the work into a more manageable load and allow people to really focus on things. And we think that's the only way we're going to get this done in any reasonable amount of time. So I think that's everything. Did I miss anything, Bob?
No, I think it's, I think you nailed, you hit on everything, and it's really important that we have, you know, intellectual interests on the part of the committee members in areas in which, you know, we can all provide value. My bias, of course, I'll put my bias on the table, and that is I really want to be able to see how whatever we come up with, how we connect with the community. And I mean, really deep inside the belly of the community itself, and in particular, how it impacts young people. And we've had a lot of discussion with regard to trauma. I've seen it in my own family, dealing with community issues. And so I just wanted to put my bias out there. So if I don't get involved in some of the stuff that Christy's involved in, I'm going to be jumping in and saying, okay, I really want to understand this. How do we get into the belly of the community and engage the community and bring the community into the work that we are doing? Because the work is really about, it's not about the current generation. It is about the future generation of our community. And that's just me. So you can call me, slam me, body slam me, whatever. But I just wanted to put my bias on the table up front. And in particular, how we engage. I know we have some educators on the community, and I was the receiver over the Detroit Public Schools and spent a lot of time with the Chicago Public Schools, and I saw a lot of bad stuff as it impacted children in the community on the way to school, and now that impact what happens in the classroom as well. So I think Christy has put together a really good outline in terms of the committees. We want to make sure we stay within the four corners of our charge from the City Council. And we definitely want to make sure that we take advantage of what Phil said early on. And that is, and we discussed this, Christy and I, and that is, while we have a committee assignment, the committee does have the flexibility of going broader, as it were. And so we really need everyone's intellectual capital engaged in this process. We're going to, I would suggest that we meet again in 2 weeks. If we could arrange something, we would have the, we would at least know what the process, we would have received the number of firms that will be competing for to work with our committee by 1 of September. So I would suggest maybe the second week in September, if we can come back together again, and then but we need your input with respect to the various committee assignments as soon as possible. Any questions? Anything that we've missed? Christy, you have anything that you want to add?
I don't have anything, but if there are any last minute questions from people, I'll send out those subcommittee questions. There are a couple of questions about the committees that people brought up, and I can just answer those if that's okay. The subcommittee topics are not set. If we think that they're too broad or too narrow, or something's missing, absolutely we should talk about that. Keep in mind that under the subcommittees are pretty broad, and so there's lots, and the subcommittees have the complete latitude to decide what fits into their subcommittee. That's not at all decided. We just need to be communicating, so we're not both working, we're not like having 3 committees working on the same thing. But yeah, we're trying to be as flexible as possible while just giving some structure and giving some people the opportunity to sort of kind of divide and conquer on this pretty broad topic. And we didn't choose, we decided that the subcommittees should decide whether they want to have chairs or co-chairs, or, whatever approach to organization they want to do. So that can be something that the subcommittee can decide as well. Anything else that I didn't get to, anyone?
I think we good. I'm glad that we've added a 21st person to our committee as well. Delante, thank you.
I know. Oh my
Everybody. He has gone through and asked me each and every one of your names. I've just gone through and told her everybody. So want to say hi?
Hi.
Oh, hi. Thanks for being here.
I'd bring my grandbaby, but she's in Guam.
We were having a meltdown, and we have a 3-week-old, and so I couldn't leave my wife stranded. So I had to parent.
That's a good thing. So, anything for the good of the order by any of the members of our commission?
I did have one question. Is that is the 2-week rotation? Is that the rhythm that we're looking for every 2 weeks?
I think after that next meeting, then we're going to figure out a cadence, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll have all the committees, and a lot of the work is going to be done in the committees, and then bring back to the full body. So I think after that next meeting, then we can figure out what will be our, the cadence for our committee meetings going forward.
Yeah, and just to flag for folks, I'll make sure to send out another doodle poll to see what time works best for everyone, what date and time, so that way we're being responsive to the fact that everybody here has a lot on their plate. So
I can also say that in the Dropbox, there's an overload of information. So if you've not signed in to the Dropbox, and please do so. And if you have if there's some research that you all have that you've come across as well that would be beneficial to all of us, please get it over to Blaine, and then we can add that to our Dropbox as well, particularly if there's some deep research or something that that would be beneficial for us as a committee going forward.
Yeah, and I do hope that one of the things that the consulting group will do is provide a sort of memoranda that kind of summarize some of the information in the Dropbox, or even do presentations for us. As you know, the reality is we're going to need that. But also, there is one thing we forgot to mention. Some of the people that we've been talking with in conversations have mentioned the idea for particular trainings or information for the commission, which Bob and I spoke about and think are really good ideas. So we want to put out the idea for these 2 ideas that have come forward already, find out whether there are more, and take and ask for your ideas about who might provide these trainings. The first training is an anti-racism training that we as a commission would take together just to start off on the right foot and to address these issues, which are absolutely intertwined with policing and with life. And I think that could be a really it was a great suggestion, and we want to do that. So please let us know if there are any concerns about that, and if you have ideas for who might provide that training. We think it probably is going to need to be a day. I think we all have experience with such trainings that kind of do more harm than good if they're not done right, and we don't take the time to do them. So let's take the time to do it right, and let's get the right people to help us with that. That's our view. The other is sort of a history of policing with a focus on DC. We're not operating in a vacuum here. That we think can be a shorter piece, ironically perhaps, or perhaps not. But we're going to try to cover that in just a couple of hours. But again, ideas about who might help us with that, just to give people a sense about how, where some of this comes from, especially in the district. Again, we're not working with a blank slate here. There's a lot of water under the bridge. So those are 2 ideas. If there are other things that people think are important for us as a group to just educate ourselves on before we undertake this task, or as we're undertaking this task, please do reach out to us. We definitely want to consider any ideas.
And in particular on the first subject, if there are experts or individuals that you all would recommend, we certainly, we'd like to have you bring that forward. I mean, attended a number of these seminars on racism, but some good, some not so good, but I'll leave it at that. So if you all have some idea of who you would, a reference, I should say, please pass it on to us, and let's vet them together and figure out who's best to provide, if we go forward, those services to the committee.
George, I have a question, if I may.
Yeah.
The anti-racism training, I'm just wondering, is that something that police officers take as well? And if so, what we take, will it be similarly aligned to what it is they take?
Oh, I wish. Police officers generally don't take anti-racism training. They often will do a cultural competency or an implicit bias, and there's definitely some overlap. But I think this is something a little bit different, and maybe we want to, we can send something a little bit, we can send something out on how anti-racism training differs a little bit from what some of the past sort of diversity trainings have been like, and what a lot of police get as well. I'm sure there are some police departments, there are 18,000 police departments in the country. I'm sure some of them, I'm sure, I don't know, honestly, of any who are doing actual anti-racism training, but I imagine there must be some somewhere, but I don't know of them. This is really, just to be clear, this is really for us as commissioners and as people considering these issues, not, sort of specifically informing, the separate thing will be about the history of policing. That makes sense.
Thanks, Samantha.
But Blaine, you might have been answering what I was going to ask. So 2 questions. One, thank you, Christy and Robert, for lifting that up. I think those trainings are great ideas. And important for us to come up with that shared language and understanding together as a collective as we're doing this work and being grounded in this work. One question was, how do you want to receive suggestions as to who will deliver those trainings? Was my first question.
Well, Blaine is our, we get the information over to Blaine, and he'll, we're almost in daily, we're kind of locked into almost daily conversations regarding the commission and its work.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
And then my second question was to Blaine or whoever, in terms of the early on, you had requested us to send comments around the procedures and wasn't sure what the deadline was around that.
I would say in the next week and a half, if that's possible. If not, folks can let me know if they need more time, and we can always sort of push that back. But
is anyone still having problems with Blaine's emails going to their spam filter? Okay, I'm glad we've got that worked out. Okay, if you check your spam filter and you're finding things there, please let us know, because he is going to be our sort of centralized, purveyor of information for the foreseeable future. Okay, so we're a little over, but not too bad. So anything else, Bob, before we say goodnight to these fine people?
No, I'm good. I will, over the next few days, I'll be reaching out to each of you just to, have a small conversation, get to know each other. I look forward to it. I mean, there's a lot of firepower in this commission. Just hearing, the background and your interest, and so I couldn't be more excited. So thank you all, and do we have to officially say we adjourn, or can we just leave?
We can just say we're adjourned.
We're adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you,
night.
everyone.
Thank you, guys. Good
Thank you,
night.
Blaine.
Good night, Evan.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.